They say time can heal almost anything, but what happens when time only deepens what the heart never forgot? In a quiet town by the sea, a woman returns home to close the doors of her past and finds the one person her soul never stopped waiting for. This is a story of love and forgiveness, of promises buried beneath the years and the courage it takes to begin again. Whispers beneath the willow, let your heart remember what it means to come home. The train slowed to a crawl as it approached the small coastal town of Camden, Maine. Evelyn Carter pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the pine trees blur into streaks of green and silver. The ocean shimmered beyond the hills, familiar, vast, and heartbreakingly unchanged. It had been 8 years since she'd left. 8 years since she'd sworn never to return. Her reflection stared back at her, older, more tired, but still carrying that same searching look. In New York, she'd painted skylines and cityscapes, always chasing light she could never quite capture. Here she had learned what loss looked like, and what love once felt like. Now, with her mother gone and the family home left behind like a forgotten photograph, she was here to say goodbye to what remained. The train hissed to a stop. Evelyn slung her worn leather bag over her shoulder and stepped onto the platform. The sea air hit her instantly, salty, cold, alive. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting it wash through her, almost expecting to hear her mother's voice calling from the car park like she used to. But silence answered. The Carter home sat at the edge of town, a weathered Victorian with chipped white paint and a porch swing that creaked when the wind turned north. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, half expecting the scent of her mother's rose perfume. Instead, there was dust, sunlight through lace curtains, and the stillness of an empty house. She wandered through each room. The kitchen table still had her mother's sewing basket. The living room shelves still held the same family photographs, her father holding her at age 5, her high school graduation, that summer picnic with Jack. Jack. His name drifted into her thoughts like a half-forgotten melody. He'd been her best friend since childhood, the boy who taught her how to fish, who carved her initials into the old willow tree near the water. At 17, he kissed her for the first time, and she'd laughed through her tears because she'd been terrified of how much it meant. Then came the scholarship to New York. One chance to chase her dream. One goodbye that stretched into years of silence. By the second evening, Evelyn couldn't bear the stillness of the house anymore. She wandered down to the docks where the fishermen's boats swayed lazily. The sky was painted in bruised purples and soft gold. The willow tree stood where it always had, just beyond the tide's edge. She walked toward it slowly, her heart caught between memory and ache. And then she saw him. Jack Reynolds was standing by the tree, his hands resting on a piece of driftwood he'd been carving. His shoulders were broader now, his face older, his expression quiet, the way people look when they've learned to live with what they've lost. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Evelyn," he said softly, as though testing if her name still fit. "Hi, Jack," the ocean murmured behind them. Seagulls wheeled overhead. "You came back." She nodded. "For a little while. To take care of things." He studied her face. "Your mother was a good woman." "She was," Evelyn said. Her voice caught on the past tense. Jack's eyes softened. "You staying at the house?" "For now." He nodded, the silence stretching between them like a thin wire. "The willow's still here," he said, running his thumb along the carved initials on the trunk, E+J, summer '09. She smiled faintly. "I can't believe it's still visible." "Some things last," he said. "Even when we don't expect them to." They talked a while longer, about the town, about how the old bakery had closed, how the sea still froze in February. Jack had taken over his father's carpentry shop after the old man's stroke. He spoke quietly, like someone used to silence, but every word carried weight. When the light began to fade, Evelyn said, "It's good to see you again." "You too," Jack replied, though the words sounded like they hurt. As she walked away, she turned once more. He was still standing beneath the willow, watching the sea. The wind tugged at his shirt, the sun bleeding gold along the horizon, and for a moment, just a fleeting one, it felt like no time had passed at all. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She stood by her mother's old easel in the living room. The canvas was blank. She hadn't painted in months, maybe years, at least not anything that mattered. She dipped her brush in blue. The first stroke felt hesitant, like touching something sacred after too long. Then another and another. The sea began to take form, but it wasn't New York's river skyline or city light. It was home. She painted until the moon faded into dawn. When she finally stepped back, she realized what she'd been painting: the willow tree, the ocean, and two silhouettes beneath it. Days passed in a blur of sorting through boxes and memories. The townspeople stopped by with condolences and casseroles, each visit reopening the past a little more. Jack showed up one afternoon, his pickup parked by the porch. "Thought you might need help fixing that railing," he said, holding a toolbox. Evelyn smiled. "Still can't let things stay broken, can you?" "Guess not." They worked side by side in comfortable silence. The sun slanted through the porch beams, dust motes dancing in the light. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," he said. "But someone had to stay." "For your dad?" He nodded. "And for me. I'm not sure I'd know who I was anywhere else." She looked at him, really looked, the steady hands, the quiet eyes. The boy she'd left behind had become a man built of roots and patience. "I used to think leaving was the only way to become someone," she admitted. "Now I'm not so sure." Jack met her gaze. "Maybe you already were someone, Ev. You just couldn't see it here." That evening, after he left, she found herself sitting on the porch swing long after the sun disappeared. The sea hummed in the distance. For the first time in years, she felt both lost and found, like the pieces of her life had started whispering again. She looked toward the willow tree, its dark shape swaying gently in the wind, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, coming back wasn't about endings at all. Morning came soft and grey, the kind of misty dawn that wrapped the town in quiet. Evelyn woke to the sound of rain brushing the windows. For a long while she just lay there, listening, her mother's old quilt pulled tight around her shoulders. She could have sworn she heard the sea in that rain, the same rhythm that had carried her through childhood dreams. When she finally rose, she brewed coffee, set a mug by the window, and watched the droplets race each other down the glass. Outside, the garden her mother loved was overgrown, wild with ferns and ivy. The willow by the shore swayed faintly through the fog. The past was everywhere here. It clung to her like the salt in the air. By mid-morning, there was a knock at the door. Jack stood on the porch, his flannel shirt damp, a shy smile playing at his lips. "Brought you something," he said, lifting a paper bag. "Blueberry muffins. From Nora's cafe. Figured you probably haven't been eating much." Evelyn blinked in surprise. "You always did have a habit of showing up with food." "Old habits," he said. "Hope you don't mind." She stepped aside. "Come in." The warmth of his presence filled the room, not in any loud or dramatic way, but quietly like sunlight through a curtain. They sat at the kitchen table, steam curling from their mugs, the scent of blueberries and coffee mingling. "So," he said after a moment, glancing around, "this place still feels like your mom." "She never changed much after I left," Evelyn said softly. "She said it made her feel like I'd walk through the door any day." Jack looked down. "She missed you." "I missed her too," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to come back." He nodded. "Sometimes leaving's easier than returning." Their eyes met then, and in that silence, years of unsent letters, unspoken apologies, and memories hung heavy between them. After breakfast, Evelyn offered to walk him out, and somehow that walk became a stroll down the old path toward the beach. The rain had softened to mist. The willow tree loomed ahead, green and ancient, its roots gripping the earth like memories that refused to let go. Jack picked up a smooth piece of sea glass, turning it over in his palm. "You used to collect these," he said. "I still do," she smiled faintly. "They're proof that even broken things can turn beautiful." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said quietly. "They can." They stood under the willow, the air humming with the weight of things unsaid. Evelyn touched the trunk, tracing their old initials. The letters were faded but still there like ghosts of who they once were. "Do you ever think about that summer?" she asked. Jack's jaw tightened. "Every time I walk down here. I was so scared then," she admitted. "Of leaving, of staying, of everything. I thought if I went away, I'd find myself. But I just lost everything that mattered." He exhaled slowly. "You don't owe me an apology, Ev." "But I do," she said. "I left without a word." "You didn't deserve that." Jack stared at the horizon. "Maybe not. But I understood. You were meant for more than this town." She shook her head. "I was meant to paint, not to disappear." The sound of waves filled the pause between them. A gull cried somewhere in the distance. Finally, Jack said, I started building boats after you left. Boats? He smiled. Small ones. For kids mostly. I figured if you can't control the sea, you can at least learn to float. Evelyn laughed softly, the first real laugh she'd let out in weeks. You always did make sense out of simple things. Simple's easier to fix, he said. She looked at him, and something inside her stirred, not the wild, breathless rush of first love, but a quieter warmth. The kind that feels like coming home after a long storm. That afternoon she invited him to see her mother's studio. Dust motes danced in the light as they stepped inside. Canvases leaned against every wall, some unfinished, others half forgotten. This was her sanctuary, Evelyn said, running a hand along a table scattered with brushes. I used to sit here and watch her paint when I was little. She'd tell me colors were like emotions, you had to feel them before you used them. Jack smiled. Looks like you inherited that. She hesitated. I haven't painted anything real in a long time. Until the other night. Can I see? Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. She pulled the canvas from beside the easel, the one she'd painted that first night home. The willow tree. The ocean. And two shadowed figures beneath it. Jack's breath caught. That's us. I guess it is. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he touched the edge of the canvas gently, as if it were something fragile. It's beautiful, Ev. Her throat tightened. I didn't mean to paint it. It just happened. Maybe some things never really leave us, he said softly. Over the next few days they fell into an easy rhythm. Coffee in the mornings, quiet walks by the shore, evenings spent fixing small things around the house. Evelyn began painting again. The colors came alive, deep blues, golds, muted grays of coastal dawn. Each stroke felt like a confession, each canvas a step closer to forgiving herself. Jack would sometimes sit nearby carving driftwood, the sound of his knife against wood steady and soothing. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, she asked, Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed? He paused, then said, All the time. But wondering doesn't change what is. What is then? He met her gaze. You're here now. Something in the way he said it, simple, sure, made her heart stutter. Later that night, unable to sleep, Evelyn wandered down to the willow. The moon hung low, silvering the waves. She pressed her hand to the old carving again, feeling the grooves of their initials. You still talk to it? Came Jack's voice from behind her. She turned, startled. Couldn't sleep either? He shook his head. Never could on nights like this. They stood together in silence, the wind threading through the branches above them. I used to come here every week after you left, he said. At first because I was angry. Then because I missed you. Then because I didn't know how to stop. Evelyn swallowed. I'm sorry, Jack. I know. The tide lapped at their feet. She felt the world shrink to that moment, the sound of waves, the scent of rain and pine, the nearness of him. Do you think we could ever, she started, but her voice faltered. He stepped closer, his voice low. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know what it feels like right now. The air between them trembled. For a heartbeat, she thought he might reach for her. But instead he just smiled, a small, sad smile, and said, Good night, Eve. And then he walked away, leaving her under the willow, her heart tangled in roots and memory. The next morning, Evelyn found a small bundle wrapped in cloth on her porch. Inside was a carved wooden boat, smooth, delicate, shaped by steady hands. On the underside, etched in careful letters, were 3 words, for the ones who return. She pressed the little boat to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she didn't feel lost. She just felt alive. The air shifted that morning, heavy, restless, carrying the taste of rain long before the clouds arrived. Evelyn could feel it in her bones, the same way her mother once could. The sea tells you before it turns, her mother used to say. By noon the wind was whispering through the eaves. Seagulls wheeled low and uneasy above the shore. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the horizon darken, paintbrush still in her hand. Her easel had been set up outside all week. She'd been working on a new piece, the sea before a storm, wild and uncertain, just like the way she felt. Jack's truck rumbled up the dirt road, headlights slicing through the haze. He stepped out, a jacket slung over one shoulder. Thought I'd check on you, he said. They're saying this one might get rough. I'm fine, she said, though she wasn't sure she meant it. He glanced at her painting and smiled faintly. You always liked chasing storms. Maybe I just never learned to stay still, she said. He nodded, studying her for a long moment. There's something different in your eyes lately. What do you mean? They look lighter. Like you're finally breathing again. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Maybe I am. Inside, they set about battening down the shutters, making sure candles and flashlights were within reach. It felt strangely domestic, the two of them moving in sync, like they'd done this all their lives. When the first crack of thunder rolled across the sky, Evelyn flinched. Jack glanced at her, then quietly said, "It'll pass." But she wasn't sure the storm outside was the one she feared. As the afternoon deepened, rain began to fall, first in gentle streaks, then in sheets. The house groaned with the wind. They retreated to the kitchen, the sound of rain on the roof like a heartbeat above them. Evelyn poured tea into 2 chipped mugs. "Feels strange," she said, handing him one. "Being back here, like time just folded in on itself." Jack looked around. "You ever think maybe that's what memory does? Loops you back until you're ready to let go?" "Maybe," she said softly. "But what if you're not ready?" "Then you hold on," he replied, "until it hurts less." The simplicity of his words broke something in her. She looked up, eyes glistening. "Jack, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why didn't you ever leave?" He hesitated, then said, "Because every time I thought about going, I remembered the look on your face the day you left. Like you were trying to breathe for the both of us. Someone had to stay behind and keep the air." Evelyn blinked back tears. "That's not fair." "Life rarely is," he said gently. The power flickered, then went out. Darkness swept through the room, broken only by the glow of a single candle on the counter. The wind howled outside, bending trees, rattling shutters. Jack stood and went to the window. "Looks bad out there," he murmured. Evelyn joined him, her shoulder brushing his. For a moment, the closeness felt almost unbearable. "I used to think storms were terrifying," she said. "But my mom always said they were just the sky's way of remembering how to cry." Jack smiled faintly. "Then maybe this town needed a good cry?" They both laughed, soft, fragile laughter in the dark. Hours passed. The storm raged, but inside the small house, something quieter unfolded. They sat on the living room floor, candles flickering, voices low. Jack told her about his father, how the stroke had changed everything, how he'd spent nights carving wood just to stay sane. Evelyn shared stories of the city, the loneliness between gallery shows, the exhaustion of pretending success felt like fulfillment. "It's strange," she said finally. "You can be surrounded by people and still feel like you're vanishing." "I think that's why I liked building things," he said. "Wood doesn't lie. You put time into it, it remembers." She smiled faintly. "People don't always." "No," he said softly. "But sometimes they come back." Their eyes met, and in that fragile flickering light, the years between them seemed to fall away. Evelyn could feel her pulse in her throat. "Jack," she whispered. He leaned forward just slightly, enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. Then he stopped. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "But I want to," she said. "I was wrong to think that leaving meant freedom. It just meant losing you." Jack's voice broke. "Ev." But before he could answer, a sharp crash echoed from outside, the unmistakable sound of something breaking. They rushed to the porch. The old willow swayed violently, its branches whipping in the wind. A massive limb had fallen, splitting the fence. Evelyn gasped, "The willow!" Jack grabbed her arm. "Get inside. It's not safe." But she shook her head. "That tree, it's all that's left of everything we were." Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the carved initials on the trunk. For a heartbeat, the whole world seemed suspended, the storm, the sea, the ache of years. Then the rain came harder, forcing them back inside. Evelyn stood trembling by the door, her heart pounding. "It's like it's trying to take everything back." Jack caught her hands, his touch steady and grounding. "Let it take what it wants," he said. "What's meant to stay will stay." Her breath hitched. "What if that's not true?" He looked at her, really looked, and said, "Then we build it again." When the storm finally passed, the world outside was a quiet ruin. Branches littered the yard. The willow still stood, scarred but unbroken. Evelyn stepped outside at dawn, the sky pale with new light. Jack was already there, clearing debris, sleeves rolled up, hair damp with sweat and rain. She walked toward him. "You stayed through the night?" He nodded. Didn't seem right to leave. They stood side by side, looking at the wounded tree. Guess she made it, Jack said softly. Evelyn reached out, brushing her fingers against the bark. She's stronger than she looks. So are you. The words lingered in the cool morning air, as steady as his gaze. For the first time, she didn't look away. Later, while helping him gather fallen branches, Evelyn noticed something glinting in the mud, an old rusted tin box half buried at the tree's base. She knelt, wiped it clean, and opened it carefully. Inside were a few water-stained letters and a photograph, her mother, young and smiling, standing beside a man who wasn't Evelyn's father. What's that? Jack asked, peering over her shoulder. I don't know, she whispered. It looks like my mother. She unfolded the first letter, the ink faded but legible. My dearest Eleanor, if the sea ever returns this to you, know that I never stopped loving you. I built that bench beneath the willow for us. If you find this one day, I hope you forgive me. The signature was barely visible, but one name was clear enough to read. William Reynolds. Evelyn's heart stopped. Reynolds? She whispered. Jack, that's your grandfather's name? Jack stared at the page, his face pale. That can't be right. But it was. The truth hung between them, sharp, electric. Their families had been tied long before they ever met. The willow had been born from someone else's love story, one hidden, one unfinished. Evelyn's voice trembled. All this time, we were part of something that began before us. Jack looked at her, eyes wide with something like wonder. Maybe we were meant to find it. They sat under the willow until the sun rose fully, the letter between them, the storm's remnants glistening like tears across the grass. It wasn't just a revelation, it was a reminder. Love, in all its forms, leaves traces. Evelyn turned to him. What do we do with this? Jack smiled faintly. Maybe we give it an ending. She nodded. Together. And for the first time, she said it with certainty. The morning after the storm smelled of salt and rain and second chances. The town stirred slowly to life, fishermen checking their boats, shopkeepers sweeping water from their doorways. But down by the shore, beneath the battered willow, time felt different. Evelyn sat on the old bench, the tin box resting on her lap. Jack knelt nearby, repairing a section of the broken fence. The letter they'd found the night before still pulsed quietly in her chest like an unanswered question. When Jack straightened, brushing sawdust from his hands, she said softly, Your grandfather loved my mother. He nodded. Looks that way. And she loved him. Guess the sea never carried their story home until now. They fell silent, the sound of waves and gulls filling the space between them. Finally Jack said, You know, my grandfather used to come here every Sunday before he passed. I never understood why. He said he'd made something here he could never forget. Evelyn ran her fingers over the carved initials in the willow's trunk. Maybe this tree has been carrying their secret all these years. Or maybe, Jack said, it's been waiting for us to finish what they started. She looked at him then, really looked, the calm steadiness of his eyes, the sun glinting off his damp hair, the way his presence felt like home after too many years adrift. Something inside her loosened, quiet and certain. Jack, she whispered, I think I was always meant to come back here. He smiled gently. Then maybe I was meant to wait. Over the next week, the days slipped by like pages in an old journal. Evelyn spent her mornings painting near the willow, her afternoons helping Jack rebuild the storm-damaged fence. They shared meals, stories, silences that didn't need to be filled. One evening, she invited him to dinner. She cooked simple food, grilled fish, roasted vegetables, blueberry pie that didn't quite hold together but smelled like childhood. They ate on the porch as dusk deepened around them. The world outside hummed softly, the ocean whispering, crickets tuning their small violins. Jack leaned back in his chair. Haven't had pie like this in years, he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Tastes like my mom's. Evelyn smiled. She used to trade recipes with mine. Every summer picnic, remember? He chuckled. You always stole the last slice. You let me. Still do. Their laughter faded into quiet. The kind that settles not from discomfort, but from a peace that has taken its time finding you. After they cleared the dishes, Jack lingered by the porch railing. Ev, he said, his voice low, what are you going to do with the house? She sighed. I'm not sure yet. Part of me thinks I should sell it. Start over. And the other part? She looked toward the willow, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The other part wants to stay, to finish what my mother started. Maybe open a little gallery here near the water. Jack smiled. You'd make this town beautiful again. I think it already is, she said. Their eyes met. Something in the air shifted, tender and certain. Jack took a slow breath. You don't have to decide tonight. Maybe I already have. Later, when he walked her to the door, the air was cool and sweet with salt. She turned to him, her hand resting lightly on the porch post. Jack, she said, thank you for everything. He shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. I do, she said, for fixing what's broken. Even when it isn't wood. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Jack reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers trembling slightly. Evelyn, he said softly, I never stopped caring. Not once. She closed her eyes, tears catching the light. I know. When he kissed her, it wasn't the wild, desperate rush of youth, it was slower, deeper, an unspoken promise woven through years of silence. Outside, the waves whispered against the shore, and the old willow swayed gently in approval. The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn. She stood by the window, the little wooden board Jack had carved resting on the sill. Its inscription caught the pale light for the ones who return. She smiled and whispered, I came back. The day unfolded quietly. She spent the morning painting, finishing the piece she'd begun before the storm. It was the sea again, but calmer now, touched with sunlight breaking through clouds. And in the distance, two figures walking toward the water hand in hand. When she stepped back, she realized she'd painted herself and Jack. Her heart swelled. That evening, she carried the finished painting to Jack's workshop. The scent of cedar and varnish filled the air. He was bent over a half-built boat, hands steady, expression focused. I brought you something, she said. He looked up, wiping his hands. Another masterpiece? Just a memory, she said, setting the painting down. Jack stared at it for a long time. It's us. It's what I want us to be, she said softly. He smiled, a warmth spreading across his face that made the whole room glow. Then I think we already are. That night, they returned to the willow together. The air was still, the sea calm. Evelyn placed the old tin box beneath the tree once more. For them, she said, and for us. Jack nodded, his hand finding hers. They sat there until the stars came out, the waves whispering the same rhythm their hearts now shared. Evelyn rested her head on his shoulder. Do you think love really survives everything? Jack thought for a moment. Maybe it doesn't survive unchanged, he said. But it learns how to begin again. She smiled. Then I think we just did. The willow rustled softly in the night breeze, its branches swaying like a benediction. Spring arrived softly that year, slipping into Camden on tides of green and birdsong. The air warmed, the sea mellowed, and the town seemed to breathe again. Evelyn Carter no longer felt like a visitor. The house, once silent and heavy with absence, had found its rhythm again. She'd cleared her mother's studio, scrubbed the salt from the windows, and opened them wide to the ocean breeze. On the easel by the window stood a new canvas, one that wasn't about loss or leaving but light. Jack had started coming by every morning. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with flowers, sometimes just to sit in the quiet while she painted. He never asked what she was working on, he just let the space fill with the steady sound of brushes and waves. It was the kind of companionship that didn't need to prove itself. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the porch, Evelyn said, I've decided to stay. Jack looked up from the chair he was sanding. Here? In Camden? She nodded. I'm turning the downstairs parlor into a gallery. For my mother's paintings and mine. I want people to see what love looks like when it doesn't give up. He smiled slowly. You really mean it? I do, she said. I thought leaving would make me bigger. Turns out, staying does. Jack set down the sandpaper, his eyes shining. Your mom would be proud. Evelyn smiled. She'd probably tell me to clean the place before I open it. They laughed, and in that laughter, the past seemed to loosen its hold. Weeks passed. The gallery took shape, soft white walls, wooden floors polished to a dull shine, frames that Jack built himself. Evelyn hung her mother's work first, each painting telling its own quiet story. Then, in the center of the room, she placed her own The Sea After the Storm, sunlight breaking through, two figures beneath the willow. When the opening day came, the whole town turned out. Neighbors brought flowers, children ran along the porch steps, and for the first time, Evelyn didn't feel like she was standing in someone else's life. Jack arrived late, hands tucked in his pockets, a small smile playing at his lips. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," she corrected. He looked around the room, then back at her. Feels like the town's heart started beating again. Maybe it just needed reminding. They stood together watching people move from painting to painting, listening to the low hum of voices. Evelyn leaned toward him and whispered, "Do you think they'll understand what this place really is?" He smiled. "They don't have to. It was never for them, not really." Later that evening, when the last guests had gone and the gallery was quiet again, Jack turned to her. "You never told me what you're going to call it," he said. Evelyn smiled, walking over to the front window where a small wooden sign leaned against the wall. She lifted it and held it up. Painted in delicate letters were the words, "Whispers of the Soul." Jack ran his thumb along the edge of the sign. "That's perfect. It's what her paintings always were," Evelyn said, "and what ours have become." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I want to show you something." They walked down to the shore, the twilight soft and golden. The willow stood tall again, leaves shimmering in the breeze, the earth at its roots rich with spring growth. Jack knelt by the trunk, brushing aside a patch of soil. "I've been working on something," he said, pulling a small metal plaque from his jacket. He pressed it into the ground at the base of the tree. Evelyn bent to read it. "For those who loved before us, and those who will love after, may the sea carry every whisper home." Her breath caught. "Jack?" He smiled shyly. "I thought maybe the willow deserved a name." Tears filled her eyes. "It's beautiful." They stood together beneath the tree, hands clasped, the sun melting into the water. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn didn't feel like she was running from her life, she was living it. That summer became one of golden light and slow days. Evelyn's gallery flourished. Tourists wandered in from the pier, drawn by the sound of music she played softly from an old record player. Jack's workshop buzzed with orders for boats and furniture. Sometimes, when she closed up shop in the evenings, she'd find him waiting outside, the old truck idling, ready to drive down to the water. They'd sit beneath the willow and watch the tide come in. One night, as stars rippled over the sea, Evelyn said, "Do you ever think about the people who'll find us here one day? The way we found them?" Jack smiled. "Maybe they'll find their own letters. Or maybe they'll just feel what we did, that love leaves echoes." She leaned against him. "Echoes aren't a bad way to be remembered." He kissed her temple. "Neither is staying." Years passed quietly. Seasons changed, leaves fell and returned, and the willow grew thicker, its roots curling deep into the soil. Evelyn's hair turned the color of seafoam, Jack's hands lined with the years. Yet the love between them didn't fade, it deepened, like water carving stone. On their 15th spring together, Evelyn painted her last great work, a vast canvas of the willow and the sea, sunlight spilling through its branches, two shadows sitting beneath it hand in hand. She called it, "The Ones Who Stay." When she finished, she placed it in the gallery beside her mother's first painting. The circle at last was whole. Sometimes, the townsfolk would see Evelyn and Jack walking along the shore, their steps slow but steady, their laughter carried on the wind. They became part of Camden's rhythm, the painter and the carpenter, the couple who rebuilt what time had broken. And if you listened closely, on quiet evenings when the tide rolled in just right, you could still hear the willow whispering, soft and sure, the stories of all who had loved there. Because love, like the sea, never truly ends. It only changes shape, returning always to the shore. Sometimes love doesn't need to be found again, it just needs to be remembered. Thank you for listening to Whispers Beneath the Willow. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in love, and subscribe for more soulful stories every week. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers of your soul.